I think you need to know what your values are as an organization to build your team, to build your board. Like, I need to know those things because that's gonna inform who I hire, how I show up, how I expect others to show up. And I need to know that deeply about who I am and bake that into my brand strategy.
Compelling argument. No one does that. That's my take.
Bullshit, I do that.
I'm Eric Ressler.
I'm Jonathan Hicken.
And this is Designing Tomorrow. Okay, Jonathan, I'm very excited for today because we're going to continue talking about brand strategy and strategy in general. And I thought it'd be really fun to do. Have you ever seen these like tier ranking YouTube videos or podcasts before?
Oh yeah, I listen to Bill Simmons' podcast and he does this with sports all the time.
Okay, cool. So we're going to give our shot at this, but we're going to be tier ranking the elements of brand strategy.
Awesome. Amazing.
And okay, what even is brand strategy? We just did an episode, what the fuck even is strategy? We're going to keep going deep on these things. So as a designer and a branding guy, you know, I think deeply about brand strategy. We do a lot of brand strategy work with our clients, but there's a lot of these different like elements of brand strategy, like mission and vision and niche and all these things. And, you know, sometimes frankly, like I look at our brand strategy process and framework almost every year and I'm like, how can we and how might we simplify this? Because I do think sometimes these processes can be overinflated, a little bit of almost just like kind of process theater, things that sound great in proposals. And then halfway through, you're like, what are we even doing here? So today, I hope we can get more clarity for our listeners around like, yes, you do need a brand strategy. And what does that mean exactly? And what are the elements that matter? And what are some of the elements that are, in fact, just kind of overrated and not as important as we think they are?
I've got my elements tiered out here, man. I'm ready to get into it.
So the other thing I just want to tease is that we're going to talk a lot about all these different elements of brand strategy, and it's going to probably feel maybe even a little, I don't know, overwhelming to some of our listeners.
Sure.
I think at the end of the day, this really boils down to 4 questions that you need to be able to answer as a leader for an organization. And so once we get through the tiering, I'm going to ask those 4 questions, give an example, and hopefully that'll be a nice like summary takeaway for today.
And just to be clear, we're not talking about people strategy. We're not talking about financial strategy. We're talking about brand strategy, kind of like limiting it there, right?
I think so. And I mean, I would say that brand strategy should influence some of those decisions.
Yeah, and vice versa.
But yeah, we're talking about brand here, baby.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right, so here's where we're going to start. We're going to go, and I'm going to have you rank first, and then I'm going to rank for each of these. And we're going to start with the most common one of mission and vision statements. And just to be clear, we're going to rank these on 3 different like tiers, basically. So is it essential? Is it important? Or is it overrated?
Okay.
So mission and vision statements.
Overrated.
Oh, I was hoping we disagree on this one. Definitely overrated.
It's definitely I mean, this is kind of like there's baggage to this one, right?
Yeah, especially for me.
There's like a century of history and mission and vision statements. And there's a whole like, when I say overrated, it's all that stuff. So it's not just the like, hey, here's our mission, here's our vision. Like I think there's value in those things. But when we think about mission and vision statement as like this process and you got to get your board and everybody involved in 1,000 voices to like write the perfect sentence, like that is the thing that's overrated.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're perfectly aligned on this one. I was hoping we get some like early disagreement. But yes, I think you need a vision statement. I think you need a mission statement. Yeah. I think you should even think deeply about those things. Yeah. What I see doing a lot of these and clients coming and hiring us to help them build some of this out as part of their brand strategy and their messaging strategy is that they get an outsized amount of effort and the impact of them is usually not very important. And so, yes, we get into wordsmithing land like really, really early. We get into, oh, well, the board member thinks this word needs to be in there. And, oh, we're forgetting about this one program that's really important too. And so then what inevitably happens is you end up with these jargon-filled laundry list mission and vision statements that people read and you're like, oh, well, that sounds cool. And I have no idea what you do.
I think what ends up happening is we try to use these mission and vision statements as tools to do a lot of different things.
Yeah.
When they really serve one purpose, and it's kind of a sales purpose. It's almost like your elevator pitch. The best version I think of a mission and vision statement is the thing that you tell someone like, what does your organization do when you're in passing?
Yeah.
Right? It's like it's my quick pitch.
Okay. So you think about it almost like a little elevator pitch.
It's like a little elevator pitch, and you should have that.
Yeah.
You should have that. But as far as it being like central to brand strategy, totally overrated.
Okay. I think we're mostly in agreement on that one. Let's keep going. So next one up on the list for me is brand values.
Brand values. Okay. I think it's essential.
Oh, okay. So I have brand values overrated. So you go first.
Okay,
Yeah.
here's the disagreement you're going for. Okay. I think that brand values are essential because it's a part of defining who you are and knowing who you are. And that's going to be a thread through all of the items here that I call essential.
Okay.
And that is like this deep sense of self-awareness. Mm-hmm. And I think you need to know what your values are as an organization to build your team, to build your board, to motivate people. I think you need to know those things and this is coming from an executive director seat, right?
Yeah, right.
Like I need to know those things because that's going to inform who I hire, how I train, how I show up, how I expect others to show up. And I need to know that deeply about who I am and bake that into my brand strategy.
Compelling argument. No one does that. That's my take.
Bullshit. I do that.
Okay. You're like the only person I know who does that. So, okay, here's my take on this one. I see this kind of similar to mission and vision statements where like we choose these words, and we did an early episode on brand values.
We did.
And you impressed me because I was like, this is the smartest way I've ever heard anyone articulate how to actually take brand values and put them into action. And it's funny because like we have values at Cosmic, and I couldn't even rattle off what my actual values list is because I didn't do as good of a job as you're doing with your brand values. But there are a couple that kind of stick with me. And I remember talking about this in the episode that we did. So one of ours is Kaizen, which is a Japanese word that basically means continuous improvement. And so there's these values that become like very embodied that I can like remember. And they become for me like less of a laundry list of things I remember and more of just like an embodied knowing. And that's the best version of a value, right? And I think that is very important. And so I hear your argument around like knowing that and knowing who you are is really critical. However, what I mostly see is that this is the same kind of trap that we fall into when it comes to mission and vision statement, where we come up with these words like integrity and empathy that are just so ubiquitous that they essentially mean nothing.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's why I kind of like somewhat controversially put this in the overrated, because that version of brand values is more common and is a trap, I think. And I think especially when they become these like, oh, we're going to go do a retreat and we're all going to figure out our values and then we're going to live our values and we're going to put them on the website and we're going to print posters. I think that's mostly how it happens. And I just honestly, I don't ever hear anyone say, well, one of our brand values of this is this, and so we're going to act this way. So maybe it is more of just an embodied thing. So I don't know. What's your counterpoint to mine?
I think in the version of the motivational poster,
yeah,
like I agree with you. That is overrated. If that's as far as you take the brand values work, then it's totally overrated. Waste of time. If you're going far enough to incorporate those values into expectations for your people, into how your tone, your messaging, right? If you're integrating those values thoughtfully into other elements of your business, I think that is essential because it helps define who you are for yourself, for your team, for your supporters, etc. But you're right, that work doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
And so lacking that work, overrated. I can see that.
So phoned in brand values.
Yeah.
Overrated.
Okay, I can get on board with that.
Well executed, deep, strategic, integrated, embodied brand values, essential.
Yes.
All
yes.
right.
All right.
Okay, agreed. All right, let's keep going. So next we have positioning, differentiation, and we'll just kind of like the word I like to use for this is niche.
Yeah. Essential.
Okay.
Again, this is about knowing who you are.
Yeah.
Knowing how you fit. It's almost like it's a flavor of product market fit.
Yeah.
Or service market fit, right? And I think that you need to know where you sit in your sort of community of focus. That could be community, regional, state, national, international, whatever. But you need to know who you are and how you fit. And I think that clarity is essential to building everything else around it.
This is essential for me too. If I could tier rank my essential tier, this would be the top. And the reason I say that is because in the social impact space, I think this gets... whereas like mission and vision get outsized attention, this gets like less attention than it should. And this is where we run into like all these different nonprofits who are all kind of working on the same issues in the same way. So not enough like differentiation, not enough understanding of like where the needs are and where there's white space opportunities. And, this isn't the same as in the business world where you need to differentiate or you die necessarily, like, because we're not in competition with one another. We're in collaboration with one another for the most part. But I think really getting clear on your niche is just absolutely critical because it is everything else is downstream of that, right? And I think we're starting to see some themes here. So we spend a lot of time when we work with our clients helping them figure out, how are you positioned in the way we like to describe it, the broader social impact ecosystem? And there are different levels you can look at. You could look at that regionally. You could look at that in terms of the skill set. I often think about this as like, what is your sweet spot? Like, what is unique about how you do your work that you can claim that is different and advantageous to creating an impact in ways that even peers in your social impact ecosystem wouldn't be able to claim in the same way? Getting really clear on your niche, to me, unlocks all kinds of amazing things. And maybe I'm a little biased here because when we decided to niche in on the social impact space, there was this fear that I had around, well, now I'm pigeonholing myself and now I'm going to say no to all these opportunities. But as we talked about in previous episodes, saying no is strategy, right? That's like one of the hardest things about having conviction with a strategy. So to me, niche is just probably the most important and most underlooked element of brand strategy in this space.
You mentioned competition versus collaboration, and I think that having your niche well-defined actually is a benefit for collaboration.
Agreed.
Yeah, because you can show up to the table and you can say to your collaborators, here's our piece.
Right.
And that's your piece. And if we put these pieces together, we can do great things. In some of the collaborative situations or kind of the conversations I've been in, lacking that clarity on your niche can just kind of lead to just like this like sort of nebulous like confusion about how we want to work together, but we don't really know how.
I think that's so true. And also someone who before felt like they might be in competition with you now suddenly become more of a collaborator.
Correct.
And you can say clearly, no, this is actually not our sweet spot, but this org over here who's very adjacent to us would be a perfect fit for you.
Exactly.
And vice versa. I think also being clear on your niche is magnetic for referrals and introductions and that kind of like natural networking that happens. Because if someone knows you and they're like, well, they're kind of in the climate environment space, but I don't really know exactly how they're different or unique in any way or what exactly they do, then how are they supposed to introduce you to the people who are going to help move your mission forward?
Last thing I'll say as an executive director, knowing what your niche is like a stress reducer.
Oh, huge one.
It's a huge stress reducer because when these news of other organizations or other things like pop up, rather than being fearful that like, oh, they're going to beat me or they're going to attract more gifts or whatever, if you have your niche, you can easily just be like, oh, no, that's a different thing.
The way that I think about this sometimes, to just piggyback off that, is like you're like pre-deciding how you're going to act in the future.
Yeah,
and it's not niche isn't the only way you do this. It's just kind of about boundary setting in general.
Totally.
It's like I'm going to make the decision now so that in the future when there's some kind of deliberation that might happen, I don't have to spin out on it mentally. That mental taxation just goes down immediately because it's like I've already made this decision 3 months ago.
Totally. 100%.
And then you can just do it.
So if for wellness alone, I recommend that you develop your position and niche. Yeah.
Okay, next one.
Let's go.
Tagline.
Overrated.
Taglines are overrated.
Yeah.
People love taglines.
Yeah.
They want their taglines.
No.
They think their tagline is the most important thing. If only we just had the perfect tagline, all of our problems would be solved.
Yeah.
No one gives a shit about your tagline.
Nah.
I mean, maybe if you're Nike, and that's like the one example of a tagline that people actually remember that's any good.
Yeah.
The other big trap that I think people fall into with taglines is they're like, the tagline must describe who we are, just like the logo must visually represent who we are. Another common mistake. And no, it doesn't. And you don't need one. Like, that's my take on it.
Honestly, I don't think we need to spend too much time on this one.
Okay.
Because it's overrated. Don't spend time on it.
Okay, listeners, no more taglines allowed. Unless you can come up with a really good one. All right, next one should be interesting. Audience segmentation and personas.
Essential.
Okay.
Essential. And again, this is about understanding who you are and who you serve and just this deep sense of self-awareness.
Yeah.
And I have a background in tech, so there's also just like this was hammered into me like early in my career on understanding the customer and everything like that. So I think deeply understanding your customer or your constituent or whatever, whatever word you use, that has to be crystal clear.
Yeah.
As you're making decisions and building programs and iterating, you have to have that always in focus when you're making these decisions. And you need to be able to segment. Just a quick example from Seymour Center. We have this fabulous educational program that's like a field trip to our center. You probably went to something like this when you were a kid. Our kids are going to be coming to this program, I'm sure, here soon. On the surface, it seems like it's a youth program.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think it's a teacher program.
Yeah.
So I think we're actually providing more of a value to teachers. Not to say we're not serving the kids and providing value there, but when we think about designing this program, we're actually designing it to meet the teacher's needs first.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's just one little example of how we're using audience to make decisions internally, and it's because we know who we are and what this program's all about.
Okay, so I have audience segmentation and personas in important but not essential.
Okay,
and I think it's because of the persona that like put me that way.
The activity of like creating the persona.
Yeah. To me, this goes back into that kind of performative like process theater side of things. So I agree. Knowing your audience, knowing who you are for, and actually that example you gave is great because the audience you think you're for, like I really recommend a like peeling of the onion style exercise for this, of just like really like deeply questioning some of these assumptions around like, oh, we serve kids. It's like, okay, but who are you actually serving in that scenario? That pushes me up into essential when you start to think about it that way. Persona exercises irk me because they feel reductive and in a way that's not actually helpful for moving processes forward. It feels like you're trying to, and just to be clear, like when we're talking about personas here, it's like, oh, our audience is like a 34-year-old Prius driving mom of 2. And it's just like, no, it's not. Like you're taking an entire population of people and trying to, and I get why people do it, right? Trying to paint a more like human relatable version of that. Again, I think too much time and energy gets put towards that. We do audience strategy work at Cosmic, as you could imagine. We do audience surveys, etc. The way that we segment our audiences, and we're obviously biased because we're looking at this from a brand communication standpoint, is there a meaningfully different message that needs to be developed for that audience? If yes, new audience segment. If no, figure out where to lump them in. And I found that that's a really like pragmatic and practical way of breaking down audiences we don't do any personas. No one has ever come to us and said, oh, the process was so great, except we didn't do personas. And I think that's like meaningfully hurt our success here. So I would say ditch the personas, audience segmentation, get very clear about who you know and who you're trying to reach and what you know about them. Segment based on, is there a meaningfully different message or story that you need to tell to them? And I think that's probably good enough.
Yeah. I mean, here's a really easy shortcut for personas. Just picture somebody that you know that fits that persona. Boom, done.
Yeah, and you don't need to define them. And you do need to acknowledge that like there is a persona and a segment is a group of many people, right?
Yeah,
so you can use that person as an archetype or an icon.
Exactly.
But when you start to get hyper specific about like what kind of music they listen to, like
all these fictitious things that I agree. That's not helping.
Never
anybody.
Research based, by the way, just totally vibes all the time, right? So. Hey friends, real quick before we continue today's episode. I'm Eric Ressler, founder and creative director at Cosmic. Cosmic is a creative agency purpose-built for nonprofits and mission-driven organizations. For the last 15 years, we've helped leaders like you nail your impact story and sharpen your strategy. But we're not here to just leave you with a fancy slide deck and a pat on the back. We roll up our sleeves and help you bring our ideas to life through campaigns, creative, and digital experiences. Our work together helps you earn trust, connect deeply with your supporters, and grow your fundraising and your impact. If you value the thinking we share here and want it applied to your biggest challenges, let's talk at designbycosmic.com. All right, back to today's conversation. Okay, next we've got brand voice and tone.
Important but not essential.
Okay, we're aligned there. Brand voice and tone, I think, can be a superpower for certain brands who are willing to be bold with that. Most are not. But to me, like, it's only helpful to have a strong brand voice and tone if some of the more essential elements of your brand strategy are strong.
So you agree, important but not essential.
Agree.
Yeah. Same. For me, like the items that fit into this bucket are ones where It's really about expressing who you are. And I feel like expressing who you are comes after knowing who you are.
Yes.
And so to me, this is an example of a way that you're going to express things like position and niche and your clarity on audience and stuff. And so it's just the expression piece. I think you need to be good at that, but it's important and not essential.
And I think if you think of it as essential, that's a trap. Because what I've seen sometimes is people skip the truly essential work and try and just mask it over with a really like hip voice and tone that sounds forward thinking, but actually is kind of empty inside when you open it up. So I think like, yes, it's important to have a brand voice and to have a tone and have that be consistent. Like you don't want, staff writing things in certain ways or speaking in certain ways or having a certain message that's, dissonant with how your leadership is talking. So, having a unified voice as a brand is truly important, but it should not be like the thing that you elevate.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, let's keep going. Brand story and messaging.
Important, but not essential.
Important, but not essential. We're aligned.
Yeah, same?
Yeah.
Yeah. And kind of the same argument as the last one.
Yeah, I think so. I think, what do we talk about? What do we mean when we're talking about a brand story? Like to me, this is almost more where I think about the elevator pitch versus tagline.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, or mission and vision, I think you use for that. When you run into someone and they're like, oh, you work at this org, what do you guys do? That's your brand story, right? And it should be, and that's an elevator pitch version of it, but it's your narrative, right? It's like how you talk about the work. You can, again, process theater this thing and write this like massive thing. We've been trying to like cut these down more and more. When we deliver brand stories and messaging for our clients, if we're not doing audience specific messaging, we have kind of just like the brand level one. We write a page version, a half-page version, a paragraph version, and one that you can put on your social profile. Done. And they're all basically the same. They're just cut downs. So it's when someone's like, hey, we need a one-pager about you. You have a boilerplate that's like accurate, that's, aligned with the rest of your strategy. You're not cobbling it together with ChatGPT last minute. So that's all you really need for that.
Yeah, don't work on your brand story until you know yourself and you really know what your story is, right? I mean, that's ultimately what we're saying here.
I think so. Okay. Next one's kind of an interesting outlier, not to be confused with values, your value proposition.
I'm gonna zag on you here, Eric. I created a new tier.
Whoa. You can't do that. That's not allowed. There's 3 tiers, man.
S tier, God tier.
S tier.
This is the top. This is tops.
Okay.
This is tops for me. Like you said, you put positioning niche as your kind of like number one in that. I'm like, I think it's value proposition.
Okay. I feel like most nonprofits, especially in social impact orgs, don't even think about this.
Yeah. Well, that's a problem.
I mean, do you agree?
I think it depends. I really do. I think that some, or at least the organizations I'm familiar with, like some really get it.
Yeah. Sure.
More than others. So like the reason why I think that value proposition is the most important thing, because why does any business of any type exist other than to deliver some value to the world?
Yes.
I mean, it is, to me, I think it is the very essence of working, frankly, in any organization that you want to make better.
I think that's true. But I think a lot of nonprofits especially assume that their value is obvious and inherent in just being a nonprofit.
Yes. A, yes. B, be better. Like
better,
that's what, like, we can't assume that because we're doing something that might feel good or something that we might really care about as individuals, or even that our staff and volunteers really care about it, we cannot assume that we are bringing meaningful value to our community or to whatever our sphere of influence is. We cannot make that assumption just because we think it's good or right.
I'm going to take that a step further and say you can't make that assumption even if the issue area or the problem that you're solving is worth solving, right? So, like working on solving a valuable or important problem is not in and of itself a value proposition.
Right.
That is a mission.
So, I mean, let's talk about housing and homelessness, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Housing and homelessness is important. And maybe you're working on it. But if you don't know the value that you are bringing to the problem of housing and homelessness, then what are you even doing?
You don't have a value prop.
You don't have a value prop, and you have absolutely no basis to begin your work.
So how do you think about value prop? in your work?
Yeah, it's so specifically to Seymour Center.
Sure, or just in general, as someone who's been in the social impact space in a number of different positions.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get to this. You brought up Kaizen. I'm going to go to another Japanese concept, and we may have talked about it on the pod before, Ikigai.
Oh yeah, Ikigai.
Yeah, we've talked about this, which I think is the sort of the intersection of these four pieces, which is something the world needs, something that is economically viable or that you can make money doing, something you're uniquely good at doing, and something that you're passionate about.
And the like Venn diagram where all those four converge is your Ikigai.
Yeah,
right?
is your Ikigai. And I mean, that's where my mind goes immediately is like, can you define all four of those things for yourself in terms of your organization? And also the next thing I would do is thinking about audience. We talked about audience for a second. Like, what problem do they have? Would they articulate the problem in the same way you would? And would they validate that the thing that you're doing is solving that problem?
Yeah.
So some combination of those things.
Okay, so we're pretty aligned. I have value prop as essential as well. I didn't make my own fake tier and break the rules. But yeah, value prop is high up there. And I think under considered. Like, I don't get a lot of nonprofits and social impact orgs coming to us saying, hey, we need help like defining our value prop. Although we do get that, it's a little more rare. We get a lot more people saying, oh, we need help like rethinking our mission and vision. So something to consider, I think, for our listeners. Okay, next one, also kind of a little bit of a outlier to a degree, theory of change.
Okay, I think it depends on how we're going to define this again, right? Because if it's the process of doing the thing and the flow charts and the infographics and all that stuff, like I think that you can get lost in that and it can become a waste of time. But I think at its very core, the idea that you have clarity on how your work produces meaningful impact, I think that's essential.
Okay.
I think that's essential. And you have to understand that. And you have to understand how the way that you're using donors' money, the way that you're showing up, the actual work that you're doing is producing impact, and that you're fueling the pieces of that chain that are ultimately getting you to your desired end state.
Yeah. Okay, so I hedged my bet a little and put this one at important.
Okay.
Because of that, like, those, you see these like schematic style diagrams of theory of change, and you're just like, are we building a car engine here? What's going on?
Yeah, exactly.
So I agree, though, that like you should be able to answer, how do you and how does your organization and how does its value prop and its work actually create change in the world? Like, you got to be able to answer that, and you have to be able to answer it in a way that like someone who's a lay person or not in your field as an expert could kind of just basically get it.
Yeah.
And so I would say also like important, if not essential. And I don't think it needs to be, I think we've talked about this on the show before, but at the Santa Cruz MA, the Museum of Art and History, the theory of change was a comic.
Yeah.
I loved that.
Yeah.
I was like, yes, like more comics, less engine schematics for theory of change. Right?
Yes. And by the way, I've never seen theory of change better than that one.
Yeah, that one's amazing.
Yeah.
And we'll link to that in the show notes, which I will have to do later and remember to do. I always say that. I'm like, why do I say that?
Yeah. Email us and we'll send it to you. How about that? Yeah.
Okay, last one, number 10 here, case for support.
Oh, man, this one's tough. This one's tough for me. Ultimately, I put it into important.
Okay.
Even though you and I worked on a case for support for Seymour Center, and it has been so impactful to the point where, like, in my day-to-day work, I would call it essential.
Yeah.
For me, personally, in my work, like, I need that case for support, and it's been really helpful.
Yeah.
And to me, it fits into this bucket of expressing yourself after you know yourself.
Interesting. Okay. I'm going to push back on that one a little bit. I have it in essential.
Okay.
And the reason why I have it in essential, and we can riff on this a little here, I think to have a solid case for support, going through that process forces you, if done well, to answer all of the other essential elements. You have to know what your positioning is in your niches. You have to know what your value prop is. You have to know what you are standing for in the world. Like all these things. What's the problem that you're solving? So it's kind of like a shortcut for forcing you to make the hardest and most impactful and important decisions as an organization. So I put the process as essential. Does every org need a like polished, I think sometimes you think of case for support and you think of this like report that you put together for a capital campaign, that's a version of a case for support, right? Similar to the theory of change for me is like, if I ask you, Jonathan, right now as the executive director of the Seymour Marine Discovery Center, Why should I donate? Why should I support? You should have a pretty good answer for me.
Yeah.
So to me, that's, again, I think a lot of times, and as we wrap up, I think we'll get into this here, these different elements, they feel, there's all these like terms and terminology around, well, what's a theory of change, a case for support, and it feels kind of jargony, and I'm in it every day, so I have like deep knowledge of like what it means to run these things. But if you're in a leadership position at a social impact org, like what really matters? Like what's the distilled version of this, right? And so I want to leave listeners with a kind of bigger picture takeaway, which is I think that however you describe this stuff, however you think about it, which parts you think are essential or whatnot, there's really 4 questions that you need to be able to answer as an organization. And if you can answer those questions, you could basically ignore all of this stuff at some level. And the first question is, what do you do? The second question is, who do you do it for? The third question is, how are you different? And the fourth question is, why does it matter? I think if you can answer all 4 of those questions well, you have a brand strategy and you don't need to worry about all these terms and terminology and all this process.
Preach that from the rooftops, my friend, because that's such a simple thing that literally every listener could take to their next staff meeting, takes to their next board meeting, and work through that if they don't already have the questions. It's such a simple exercise. It doesn't need to take months and months and hundreds of thousands of dollars to answer those questions. And if you can't answer those questions, that's probably really good for you to know, right? Like maybe there's some problems with your business.
The thing I will also add to that is you would be surprised how many orgs who are well-known, highly successful by common metrics of how we measure success in this space, who come in to my door at Cosmic and cannot give me a solid answer on those 4 questions. And I don't mean that in a judgmental way. I mean, this is actually, those questions are simple, but they're hard to answer. And especially if you're in a moment of transition or stepping into a new chapter as an organization, the answers to those questions may not be relevant anymore. So you might be able, well, we were this, but we're becoming something else. And I don't really know how to articulate that yet. It's this kind of vague thing we're still kind of shaping. I wanted to also just kind of share, and I challenged myself to come up with an example that was actually difficult to answer these 4 questions for. We've been working with an org called We Do for a long time now. They're amazing. Shout out to them. We just launched a new website, by the way. Go check it out, wedo.org. They stand for Women's Environment and Development Organization. Their work is very complex. They do global advocacy work. It's the kind of org that, and I'll just be honest, and Bridget, I love you to death, but this was very hard to figure out how to take this super insular advocacy policy. They're at the UN, they're at COP. Like this is like deep expertise work. And we still believe like this needs to be like distilled down into something that someone who's not in those rooms can understand without dumbing it down, right? And so I actually kind of tested. I was like, did we get to a point in their messaging where we could answer those questions? And does it show up on the website exactly like that? No. But I think we did. And so I'm going to kind of just test, like, We Do could have been a complex global advocacy organization working at the intersection of gender equity and climate justice. But like, what does that mean, right? So what do? They advocate for gender just climate policy. Who do they do it for? They do it for grassroots feminist leaders and frontline environmental defenders. How are they different? They've been doing it for 35 years, and they've been building coalitions and tools that get women in the rooms where climate decisions are made. And why does it matter? Because we know that when climate policy excludes women, the climate policy fails. Done.
It's beautiful.
So you need some kind of version like that. And if we can do it for We Do, an organization like We Do, it's doable for your organization.
That's wild. That's congratulations to We Do and to Cosmic for that, because that's super powerful. Yeah.
Okay, so Jonathan, this was great. More tier ranking podcasts coming up.
Yeah, dude, that was fun.
Yeah,
thanks, Eric.
All right, man. If you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to hit like and subscribe, or even leave us a comment. It really helps. Thank you. And thank you for all that you do for your cause and for being part of the movement to move humanity and the planet forward.